The president tomorrow night is going to be giving his State of the Union address. Now, what are some of the issues that we think he'll be talking about, and what should he be talking about? Joining me now to discuss this, items that you don't want to miss, is the chairman of the Republican Study Committee in the House, Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson, who represents the 4th Congressional District. Mike, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, Tony. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, good to talk with you as well. I know you're heading back to D.C. to be here tomorrow for the President's State of the Union address, and you and I are going to be doing an event in Bossier at First Baptist Bossier coming up, and I want people to get something to write with because we'll talk about that in a moment because that's coming up the end of this month. But first, what are some of the topics you think the President's going to focus on in his State of the Union address tomorrow night?
Well, I'll be front and center with my colleagues on the Republican side, conservatives in the House, certainly hoping that he addresses the border battle. We're all expecting that, of course, at the top of the speech, and it'll be highlighted what we're going to do about this legitimate crisis we face at the southern border. Look, we've counted at least 60 Democrats in the House, Tony, in the last several months who have individually acknowledged that we have a humanitarian and a national security crisis on the border. And everybody's playing politics with this, but it's time for it to come to an end, for good faith negotiations to be resolved. And I commend the president for his efforts there, but we've got to get this fixed. So we certainly hope that he'll address that front and center and take a hard line and get us over the hump, so to speak, so we can avoid another government shutdown. There's a number of options he has on the table, of course, but, we've been working really hard to close the asylum loopholes. I've worked on 3 different bills just in this Congress since we started in January to close the asylum loopholes. And the president's given a lot of attention to that. I expect that'll be part of the speech as well. We need to look at the very specific changes that we can make to our immigration law and the enforcement of it to solve these problems. And there's many other issues as well, of course.
So do you think the president, and do you think he should draw basically a red line on border security in his speech to, he's there in front of Congress, obviously speaking to the nation, but, we're in those negotiations. We've just got about another 10 days or so before this 3-week CR runs out. I mean, I think he has to build the wall. I think he's got to do that border security in order for him to really, I think, maintain the enthusiasm and the support of his base.
Well, he does have to build the wall, and there's that, sort of political aspect of it. But this really does transcend politics. It's not just about, the negotiations. As you well know, I mean, the reason that we've all been pushing so hard for this is because we're talking to Border Patrol agents. We're talking to the Department of Homeland Security, and they're saying that this is a legitimate, daily, serious and urgent threat to the American people. And so that's why, we applaud the president for taking the stand that he has.
And not
hopefully
just
the Democrats will do the right thing.
And not just the border. I mean, I've actually sat down back at home in Baton Rouge with agents from Homeland Security that are talking about the drug raids, the human trafficking raids that are being done right there in Baton Rouge, which is miles from the border. This is happening all across the country.
It is, and everyone laments the opioid crisis and all of the narcotics problems that we're having all across the country. If we don't secure the borders, we can pass all the legislation in the world. It's not going to solve the problem. It won't even put a dent in the problem. You've got to secure the illegal narcotics coming over the border. And there was enough fentanyl that came over that they seized in this shipment just last week to kill just about every man, woman, and child in the country. I mean, this is a very serious, urgent problem. And, of course, the human trafficking scourge and the dangerous gang activity and all the rest. We have to seal the border, and walls and barriers work. And by any objective measure and just simple common sense, we know that is at least a serious deterrent, and it's something we have to do.
You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, my guest, Congressman Mike Johnson of Louisiana, talking about the President's State of the Union address last night, and we're about to talk about a special event coming up in the Bossier City area of Louisiana. But, Mike, one other item that obviously has been front and center in the last 2 weeks because of what New York did, in trying to basically expand abortion in fear that the court may overturn or send Roe v. Wade back to the states. There has never been a clear contrast between the two parties on this issue. The president's tweeted out about it. Do you anticipate the president will draw attention to the fact that we have such a clear contrast between ideologies that are governing our country?
Tony, I certainly hope that he addresses that front and center, and I think of the vast majority of the American people are expecting him to address that. We'll be derelict in our duty if we don't. I mean, it is a stark contrast. The things that are being openly advocated for now are absolutely frightening. And, of course, it goes against the very grain of who we are as Americans, the country where we recognize that every single human life is made in the image of God and has inestimable dignity and value, and that we all have equal rights because our rights come from our Creator and not the government. What they're doing in New York, what they're proposing to do in Virginia and these other states is just unconscionable. And the Commander-in-Chief needs to address it front and center. He suggested that he probably will, and he'll get a rousing applause from our side of the aisle when he does.